The excavation team had been working on the dead planet for 3 months when they found the vault. Chief Archaeologist Villana stood at the entrance, her scanning equipment humming softly as it analyzed the ancient metal door. The symbols etched into its surface were older than the Velkari Dominion itself. They belonged to the predecessors, a civilization that had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago before vanishing without a trace. "We're breaking through now," announced her assistant, Krill. The cutting beam sliced through the final seal and the massive door groaned open. Stale air rushed out, carrying with it the scent of age and forgotten secrets. Inside, the vault was filled with data storage crystals arranged in careful rows. Most had deteriorated beyond recovery, their information lost to time, but 17 remained intact, their surfaces still glowing faintly with stored power. Villana carefully extracted one and connected it to her portable reader. The holographic display flickered to life, showing fragmented text in the predecessor language. Her translation software worked slowly, piecing together meaning from the ancient words. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Warning," the text read. "Catalog of dangerous species. Priority level extinction event." Villana scrolled through the entries. The predecessors had encountered thousands of species across their vast empire. Most were marked with standard caution labels. Some were marked as aggressive. A few were marked as highly dangerous, but only one species had a special designation that appeared in every single file about them. Humans. Origin, planet designated Earth. Third planet of a yellow star system in Sector 447. The files were badly corrupted, but fragments remained. Villana read them with growing unease. Adaptive beyond all known biological limits, refused to surrender even when defeat was certain, turned our own weapons against us with terrifying speed, psychological warfare capabilities unmatched by any species. Recommend immediate avoidance. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not underestimate. One file contained what appeared to be a final entry written in haste. "We thought we could control them. We were wrong. They learned too fast. They never forgot a single wrong we did to them. By the time we understood what they were, it was too late. If any civilization finds this message, leave the humans alone. No matter how primitive they seem, no matter how divided they appear, they are more dangerous than..." The file ended there, cut off mid-sentence. Villana copied all the recovered data and immediately transmitted it to Dominion High Command. She included her own analysis and a strong recommendation for caution. If the predecessors, who had mastered technology beyond current understanding, had feared this species enough to leave warnings, then the Velkari should take those warnings seriously. 3 weeks later, she received a response from High Command. They thanked her for the discovery and informed her that the data had been reviewed. Their conclusion: the warnings were likely exaggerated. The predecessors had fallen because they had grown soft and complacent. They had probably encountered a temporarily aggressive species and overreacted. The files were classified and archived. Villana wasn't satisfied with that answer, but she was just an archaeologist. Military decisions were made by those who understood warfare better than she did. She tried to push the matter further, but her requests for additional investigation were denied. The subject was closed. Meanwhile, in the Dominion capital, Supreme Commander Thexler sat in his strategy room reviewing recent scout reports. The Velkari Dominion controlled 47 star systems, each one conquered and held through superior military might. Their empire had been expanding steadily for 2 centuries, and Thexlar intended to continue that expansion. His military advisor, General Kortax, entered the room carrying a data pad. "Commander, the scout ships have completed their survey of Sector 447. We've identified 3 systems with habitable worlds. One of them is particularly interesting." Thexlar pulled up the report on his main display. "The third planet of a yellow star system. Abundant resources. A single sentient species in the early stages of space exploration. The species called themselves humans, and they called their planet Earth. Military assessment?" Thexler asked. "Primitive," Kortax replied. "They've only recently developed basic faster-than-light travel. Their ships are slow and poorly armed. They have no unified planetary government. Multiple nation-states constantly fighting among themselves. Their military technology is at least 3 centuries behind ours." Thexlar studied the images of Earth. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, a beautiful world rich in resources the Dominion needed. The human population was large, which meant a ready supply of labor. Their industrial capacity was impressive for such a primitive species, which meant they could be useful once properly controlled. Recommended approach? He asked. Standard subjugation protocol, Kortak said. Deploy a battle fleet. Demonstrate overwhelming force. Demand surrender and tribute. If they resist, destroy enough of their military to break their will. Establish occupation. Begin resource extraction. Texlar nodded. It was the same approach that had worked on 47 other worlds. The Velkari didn't exterminate species unless absolutely necessary. That was wasteful. Instead, they conquered, controlled, and exploited. Subjugated species provided resources and labor, while the Dominion provided protection and guidance. It was an arrangement that benefited the Dominion greatly. There was one odd note in the intelligence files, Cortax added, some ancient warning about humans found in a predecessor vault. I reviewed it myself. Typical primitive superstition. The predecessors probably encountered these humans when they were even more primitive and got frightened by their aggressive behavior. You know how old empires become paranoid before they fall. Thexelar dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. The predecessors fell because they grew weak. We are not weak. Prepare Battle Group 7 for deployment to Earth. Standard subjugation protocol. I want their surrender within a month. Yes, Commander. Kordak saluted and left to carry out his orders. Thexlar looked at the images of Earth again. Such a small planet, such a primitive species. They would barely be a footnote in Dominion history. Just another conquered world, another source of resources, another step in the eternal expansion of Velkari power. In her laboratory, Velana received notification that a military fleet was being sent to the same sector, mentioned in the predecessor warnings. She immediately tried to contact High Command again. Her calls were not returned. She sent urgent messages. They were marked as read but received no response. She pulled up the ancient warnings again, reading through them one more time. The fear in those ancient words was palpable even across millions of years. The predecessors had been terrified of humans. Why couldn't the Dominion see that? But she was just an archaeologist. No one in power wanted to hear that their expansion plans might be dangerous. No one wanted to believe that a primitive species could pose any real threat to the mighty Velkari Dominion. Velana saved all the data she had recovered. She had a terrible feeling that someday, someone would need to understand what had really happened when the Dominion went to Earth. She hoped she was wrong. She hoped the warnings were just ancient paranoia. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. The Dominion was about to make a terrible mistake, and there would be no one to save them from the consequences. The Velkari fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 23 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. Battle Group 7 had conquered 4 worlds before this one. Supreme Commander Thexlar expected Earth to be the easiest conquest yet. Admiral Zexthar commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Dominant Will. He watched the tactical display as his sensors mapped the human defenses, orbital stations around Earth, a scattered fleet of primitive warships, military installations on the planet's surface, all of it hopelessly outmatched. Begin standard approach, he ordered. Transmit the demand for surrender in all their languages. The message went out across every frequency humans used for communication. It was simple and direct. The Velkari Dominion claimed Earth and all human territories. Humanity would surrender immediately. They would provide resources as tribute. They would accept Dominion guidance and control. Resistance would be met with overwhelming force. Humanity had 12 hours to respond. In Geneva, the emergency meeting of Earth Security Council descended into chaos. Representatives from every major nation shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for resistance. Military commanders presented analysis showing that Earth's combined fleets couldn't stop even one Velkari warship, let alone 23. We need more time, the American representative said. Time to evacuate, time to prepare defenses, time for what? The Chinese representative interrupted. To die slower? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. We have no chance. We can't just surrender our entire planet, the Russian representative shouted. But they could, and they did. With 2 hours remaining on the Velkari deadline, Earth's Governments transmitted their acceptance of the terms. They had no choice. Every military strategist agreed that resistance would result in billions of deaths and accomplish nothing. Admiral Zexthar received the surrender and smiled. Another easy conquest. Another world added to the Dominion with minimal effort. His fleet moved into orbit around Earth, and occupation forces deployed to the surface. The subjugation of Earth followed the standard Dominion pattern. Major cities received occupation garrisons. Human military forces were disarmed and disbanded. Government officials were replaced with Dominion administrators or human collaborators willing to serve the new rulers. Resource extraction began immediately. Within months, Earth was transformed. Mines opened in protected wilderness areas, stripping away forests to reach valuable minerals. Factories were repurposed to produce goods for the Dominion. Fishing fleets were expanded to harvest ocean resources beyond sustainable levels. The planet that had been struggling with environmental problems found those problems accelerating under Dominion exploitation. Human labor camps were established in remote areas. Voluntary workers were recruited from overcrowded cities with promises of food and shelter. Once inside the camps, they discovered the work was brutal, the conditions harsh, and escape impossible. Velkari overseers drove them hard, believing that primitive species needed firm control. Resistance began almost immediately, but it was scattered and ineffective. Underground groups planted bombs that killed a few Velkari soldiers. Hackers tried to disrupt Dominion computer systems and failed. Protesters gathered in city squares and were dispersed with stunning weapons. The Dominion had centuries of experience putting down rebellions. They knew every trick, every tactic. What they didn't see was the pattern beneath the chaos. In a bunker, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Sarah Chen studied reports from resistance cells across the planet. She had been Chief of Staff of the United States Space Force before the invasion. Now she coordinated what remained of Earth's military forces from hiding. "They're not trying to win," her intelligence officer reported. "Every attack is designed to provoke a specific response. They're testing the Velkari, learning their tactics, their response times, their weaknesses." Chen nodded. She had seen this pattern before in military history. It was what insurgents did when facing a superior force. They probed, they learned, they adapted. But this was on a scale humanity had never attempted before. Every resistance cell, every underground group, every secret military base was gathering intelligence. "What have we learned?" she asked. The intelligence officer pulled up a presentation. "Their energy weapons have a recharge time of 2.3 seconds. Their armor is vulnerable to sustained kinetic impacts. Their communications rely on quantum encryption we can't break, but we've mapped their relay stations. Their sensors have trouble with our stealth materials. Their tactical doctrine is rigid and predictable. What about their technology? Can we copy it?" "We're trying. We've recovered weapons and equipment from destroyed Velkari vehicles. Our best scientists are reverse engineering everything. It's slow work. Their technology is complex, but..." The officer paused. "But it's not impossible. We're making progress." Chen looked at the star map on her wall. The Velkari controlled 47 systems. Humanity controlled nothing. 3 years ago, humans had been reaching for the stars with hope and excitement. Now they were slaves on their own world. "How long?" she asked. "How long until we can fight back?" 2 years, maybe 3. We need time to understand their technology, to adapt it, to produce weapons that can hurt them. We need time to train soldiers who can use those weapons. We need time to coordinate a global resistance. "Then we buy time," Chen said. "We keep the resistance alive. We keep gathering intelligence, we keep learning. And when we're ready, we hit them with everything we have." Across Earth, similar conversations were happening in hidden bases. Chinese military leaders coordinating with their Japanese counterparts. Russian scientists sharing data with American engineers. African resistance fighters training with European special forces. Indian programmers working with Brazilian hackers. The invasion had done what centuries of politics could not. It had united humanity against a common enemy. The Velkari saw none of this. They saw a broken species, defeated and docile. They saw workers who showed up for their shifts in the labor camps. They saw collaborator governments that carried out Dominion orders. They saw a few scattered resistance groups that posed no real threat. Admiral Zexthar filed regular reports with High Command. Earth was secure. Resource extraction was proceeding on schedule. The human population was under control. There had been some minor resistance, but nothing significant. He recommended reducing the occupation force to free up warships for other conquests. In the Dominion capital, Thexelar read the reports with satisfaction. Earth was another successful conquest. The warnings about humans had been nonsense, just as he had thought. Primitive species were all the same. Show them overwhelming force, and they surrendered. Control their resources, and they had no choice but to obey. He approved Zexthar's request to reduce the occupation force. 10 warships departed for other assignments. Only 13 remained in Earth's system. It seemed like more than enough to control a defeated species. In her laboratory, archaeologist Velana monitored the situation on Earth through news reports. She saw the Dominion's confident pronouncements of successful occupation. She saw the reports of minor resistance. She saw everything that High Command saw, but she also saw something they didn't. She saw how the humans fought. Not with fury or desperation, but with calculation. Every attack was different. Every resistance group tried new tactics. They were learning, adapting, evolving their methods. She pulled up the ancient predecessor warnings again. Adaptive beyond all known biological limits. The text read, "They learned too fast." Velana sent another message to High Command, warning them that the situation on Earth might not be as secure as it appeared. Her message was read and dismissed. The archaeologist was worrying about ancient myths, while the military was dealing with present reality. But reality was about to change. In bunkers and hidden bases across Earth, 3 years of preparation were almost complete. Humanity had learned everything they needed to know. They had reverse-engineered Velkari technology and improved it. They had trained millions of soldiers in secret. They had stockpiled weapons and built ships the Dominion knew nothing about. The humans were almost ready, and when they struck, the Velkari would finally understand why the predecessors had left those warnings. The uprising began at exactly 300 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Across Earth and human colonies, the carefully coordinated attacks struck simultaneously. The Velkari had expected scattered terrorism. What they got was total war. Admiral Zexthar was awakened by alarms screaming throughout his flagship. He rushed to the command center, still pulling on his uniform. The tactical display showed chaos. Red warning indicators covered every screen. "Report," he commanded. "Attacks everywhere," his tactical officer stammered. "Ground installations under assault. Supply depots destroyed. Communication relays offline. And ships?" "Admiral, we're detecting human ships. Dozens of them. They appeared from nowhere." Zexthar stared at the display. Impossible. The humans had no military fleet. Their ships had been destroyed or confiscated 3 years ago. Yet there they were, small attack craft swarming around his warships like insects. They moved with impossible speed and agility, using maneuvers no Velkari pilot would attempt. All ships, combat formation, destroy those craft. The Velkari warships opened fire with their energy weapons. Several human ships exploded, but more kept coming. They were fast, far faster than Velkari sensors had predicted, and they were firing weapons that shouldn't exist. Modified Velkari plasma cannons with increased power output, kinetic weapons that hammered at shield generators with brutal efficiency, missiles that twisted and turned like living things, avoiding countermeasures the Velkari thought were foolproof. On Earth's surface, the attacks were even more devastating. Human soldiers emerged from hiding with weapons the Dominion had never seen. They attacked in the night using darkness the way predators did. They knew exactly where every Velkari installation was located. They knew guard patterns, response times, and weak points in the defenses. The labor camp in Siberia was liberated in 12 minutes. Human special forces moved through the facility like ghosts, killing overseers with silent efficiency. The Velkari garrison commander barely had time to send a distress signal before a bullet ended his life. Human soldiers freed thousands of prisoners and vanished into the snow before reinforcements could arrive. Similar attacks happened at camps across the planet. Guard towers exploded, fences came down, Prisoners were armed and evacuated. Velkari soldiers found themselves fighting an enemy that appeared from nowhere, killed with precision, and disappeared before counterattacks could be organized. In the Dominion capital, Supreme Commander Thexlar received the first reports with disbelief. How many human ships? At least 70 confirmed, Commander. More appearing every hour. They must have been building them in secret facilities we never detected. And their weapons? Modified versions of our own technology, but altered. They've changed the designs, improved them in ways our engineers said was impossible. Their targeting systems are more accurate. Their power systems are more efficient. And they're using tactics we've never seen before. Thexlar watched footage from the battle at Earth. A human attack craft was chasing one of his cruisers. The Velkari ship tried to escape, but the human pilot stayed on its tail, matching every maneuver. Then the human ship did something insane. It accelerated directly at the cruiser, fired all weapons at point-blank range, and pulled away at the last possible moment. The cruiser's shields collapsed and follow-up missiles tore it apart. They're willing to die, Thexlar said quietly. They make suicide runs that no rational pilot would attempt. Our psychological profiles were incomplete, Commander. We assumed they valued self-preservation like civilized species. We were wrong. Over the next weeks, the pattern became clear. The humans weren't just fighting to resist. They were fighting for revenge. Every Dominion cruelty from the past 3 years was being repaid with interest. Collaborator governments were overthrown, their leaders executed by angry mobs. Velkari administrators were hunted down. Supply convoys were ambushed. Occupation forces found themselves trapped in their bases, surrounded by hostile populations. General Sarah Chen coordinated the global offensive from her command center. Reports flooded in from every continent. The Siberian camps liberated. The African mining operations destroyed. The Asian factory complexes shut down. European resistance cells controlling major cities. South American forces had destroyed the Velkari communication hub, cutting the occupation force off from reinforcements. Orbital situation, she asked. 6 Velkari ships destroyed, 3 damaged and withdrawing. 4 still fighting, but they're struggling. Our pilots are outperforming them. Chen allowed herself a small smile. 3 years of planning were paying off. 3 years of studying every captured piece of Velkari equipment. 3 years of training soldiers in secret bases. 3 years of building weapons while pretending to be defeated. But she knew this was just the beginning. Earth had only 13 Velkari ships to deal with. The Dominion had thousands more across 47 systems. And now that humanity had revealed itself, the full might of the Dominion would come crashing down on them. Send word to all units, she ordered. Phase 1 complete. Begin Phase 2, hit their supply lines. Attack their colonies. Make them divide their forces. We need to keep them off balance. In the Dominion capital, Thexlar convened his war council. General Kordak stood before him looking shaken. How could we miss this? Thexlar demanded. 3 years we occupied their world. 3 years we controlled their industry. How did they build a fleet without us knowing? Underground facilities, Kordak said. Underwater bases. Hidden factories in remote areas. They must have started planning from the moment we arrived. While we thought they were broken, they were preparing. And their technology? Where did they get the knowledge to modify our weapons? They learned from us, Commander. Every piece of equipment we used on Earth, they studied it. They captured our weapons. They analyzed our ships. And then they improved them. Our engineers still don't understand how they made some of these modifications work. Thexlar felt cold fear creeping into his chest. He had dismissed the ancient warnings as superstition. Now he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Recall our forces from the border regions, he ordered. I want 50 ships sent to Earth immediately. We will crush this rebellion and make an example of these humans. Commander, there's something else you should see. Cortax activated a holographic display showing intercepted human communications. They're not just defending. They're attacking. Human ships have raided our supply depot at Vex Prime. They destroyed 3 cargo vessels and stole military supplies. They knew exactly where the depot was and when our patrols would be elsewhere. Spies? We believe so. We're finding evidence that humans infiltrated our operation from the beginning. Workers we thought were docile were actually gathering intelligence. Prisoners we thought were broken were mapping our installations. They've been inside our networks, our databases, our command structures. They know things they shouldn't know. Thexlar stared at the display showing human attack craft. They looked almost playful as they danced around Velkari ships. as if the pilots were enjoying themselves. Enjoying war. Enjoying killing, an alarm sounded. More reports coming in. Human attacks on 3 more Dominion worlds. Simultaneous strikes on military installations light years apart. They were coordinating across impossible distances, hitting multiple targets at once. Velana's words came back to him from the ancient warning she had tried to share. They learned too fast. They never forget a single wrong we did to them. Send everything, Thexler said. Every available ship. Every soldier. We end this now before it spreads further. But in her laboratory, Velana was reading the latest intelligence reports with growing dread. The Dominion was committing more forces to Earth, just as the humans probably wanted. They were reacting predictably, following standard military doctrine. The humans had studied that doctrine for 3 years. They knew exactly how the Dominion would respond, and Velana suspected they had planned for it. She pulled up the ancient warnings one more time. If you encounter humanity, leave them alone. The predecessors had written those words millions of years ago. The Dominion had ignored them. Now they were going to learn why those warnings existed. The Velkari expected Earth to be surrounded and defeated within weeks. Instead, the war spread like wildfire across the Dominion. Human ships appeared in systems that should have been impossible to reach. Supply convoys vanished. Communication relays went dark. Military installations woke to find themselves under attack by an enemy that shouldn't exist. General Cortax stood in the Dominion Command Center, staring at the strategic map in disbelief. Red markers indicated human attacks. There were hundreds of them, scattered across 20 systems. Each attack was small, precise, and devastating. The humans weren't trying to hold territory. They were destroying infrastructure, disrupting logistics, and spreading fear. How are they moving so fast? Thexlar demanded. Our intelligence said they barely understood faster than light travel. Now they're outmaneuvering our fleets. They modified the drive systems they captured from us, Cortax explained. Made them more efficient somehow. Our engineers are still trying to understand how. The humans can travel farther on less fuel, which means they can reach targets we thought were safe. A new alert flashed on the display. The mining colony on Tevlar 4 was under attack. Thexler pulled up the live feed and watched in horror as human ships tore through the orbital defenses. The colony's garrison fought back, but they were using outdated tactics against an enemy that adapted faster than they could react. One human ship took heavy damage, but didn't retreat. Instead, the pilot aimed directly at the garrison headquarters and accelerated. The building exploded in a massive fireball. The pilot had sacrificed himself to destroy the command center, leaving the Velkari forces leaderless and confused. They don't value their own lives, Thexlar said quietly. What kind of species does that? One that's very, very angry, Cortax replied. The attacks followed a pattern that Velkari military analysts struggled to understand. The humans struck at seemingly random targets, but the cumulative effect was devastating. Supply lines broke down. Troop movements became unpredictable. Communication between Dominion forces grew sporadic. The mighty empire that had conquered 47 systems found itself unable to coordinate its own military. Worse, the Dominion discovered that the humans had been inside their networks for years. Computer systems that seemed secure had been compromised. Databases had been copied. Military plans had been stolen. Every piece of intelligence the Dominion thought was secret had probably been shared with Earth's military. Admiral Zexthar learned this lesson the hard way. He was leading a fleet to retake a supply depot when human ships ambushed him at the exact moment his shields were down for maintenance. The attack happened with such perfect timing that it could only mean one thing. The humans knew his ship's maintenance schedule. His flagship barely escaped, limping back to base with half its systems destroyed. 30 ships in his fleet weren't so lucky. They died in the ambush, torn apart by weapons that seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. They're in everything, Zexthar reported to High Command. Our computers, our schedules, our communications. We thought we were watching them during the occupation. They were watching us. The truth was even worse than he knew. During the 3 years of occupation, humans who appeared to be docile workers had actually been intelligence operatives. They had been placed in Velkari facilities, sometimes as actual prisoners, sometimes as collaborators pretending to serve the Dominion. They had mapped every installation, copied every database, and transmitted information back to the Resistance. Even more clever, Some of these operatives had allowed themselves to be recruited as crew members on Velkari ships. The Dominion needed workers who understood human languages and customs to deal with the occupied population. They had hired humans for these positions, thinking they were choosing loyal collaborators. Instead, they had brought spies directly into their military. Now those spies were everywhere. A human translator on a Dominion cruiser would sabotage navigation at a critical moment. A human technician working on a garrison base would leave doors unlocked for attacking forces. A human administrator would delete crucial files right before a battle. The Velkari couldn't trust any human in their systems, but removing them all would cripple their operations. "Recall all human workers," Thexler ordered. "Screen everyone! I want every human in our systems identified and removed." The order came too late. By the time Dominion security forces started rounding up human workers, most of them had vanished. They had escaped or been evacuated, taking their knowledge of Velkari systems with them. The few who were caught often chose death over interrogation, sometimes taking their captors with them using hidden explosives. On Earth, General Chen watched the reports with satisfaction. The intelligence network had worked perfectly. 3 years of infiltration were paying off. The Dominion was paranoid, confused, and reacting instead of acting. They were exactly where she wanted them. "Status of Project Prometheus?" she asked. Her science advisor pulled up classified files. "Complete. We've reverse-engineered their weapons and improved them. We've built ships that are faster and more maneuverable than theirs. And we've developed something they don't have. Adaptive AI. Explain." "The Velkari use computer systems, but their AI is limited and rule-based. We've developed learning systems that adapt in real time. Our ships can analyze enemy tactics during battle and adjust. Our weapons can learn from misses and improve their accuracy. We're using human creativity combined with machine speed. The Dominion has never faced anything like it," Chen smiled. Humanity's advantage had always been adaptability. Now they had built machines that shared that trait. The Velkari fought with rigid tactics and predictable strategies. Humanity fought with chaos and innovation, but the war was taking its toll. Earth had resources, but the Dominion had numbers. For every Velkari ship destroyed, 2 more arrived. The Dominion was throwing everything it had at the human uprising, determined to crush the rebellion before it inspired other subjugated species. And that was starting to happen. On worlds across the Dominion, other species watched humans fight and began to wonder. If primitives from Earth could hurt the mighty Velkari, maybe they could too. Small rebellions started on 3 worlds, then 7, then 12. The Dominion found itself fighting multiple wars simultaneously. Thexler stood in his command center, watching the empire he had spent his life building start to crumble. The economic costs of the war were staggering. Trade had collapsed. Subject species were withholding tribute. The Dominion military was exhausted, fighting battles across dozens of systems with no clear end in sight. "We could offer terms," General Cortex suggested quietly. "Withdraw from Earth, end the occupation. Focus on stabilizing what we still control." "No." Thexlar's voice was hard. "We show weakness now, and every species we've conquered will rise against us. We must defeat the humans completely. We must make an example so terrible that no one else dares to resist. Commander, the cost—" "I don't care about the costs. We are the Velkari Dominion. We have ruled for 2 centuries. We will not be defeated by primitives who barely had space travel when we found them." But in her laboratory, Velana was reading reports that told a different story. The Dominion was losing, not quickly but steadily. Every battle cost more than the last. Every victory was temporary. The humans just kept coming, kept adapting, kept learning. She had finally gotten High Command to listen to her analysis of the ancient warnings. They had brought her to the capital to brief the War Council. Now she stood before Thexlar, preparing to tell him the truth he didn't want to hear. "The predecessors didn't fall because they were weak," she said. "They fell because they fought humans and lost. These warnings aren't ancient myths. They're lessons written in blood. The predecessors learned too late that humans can't be defeated through conventional warfare. They adapt too fast. They endure too much. They never surrender." "We've conquered 47 worlds," Thexler said coldly. "We know how to break resistance, not this resistance. Every tactic you use, they learn from and counter. Every weapon you deploy, they copy and improve. You're fighting an enemy that gets stronger the longer the war continues." The predecessors realized this. That's why they wrote the warnings. They were trying to save future civilizations from making their mistake. What mistake? Fighting humans at all. Villana pulled up the recovered data. The predecessors tried to conquer Earth millions of years ago. They failed. The war destroyed their empire, and now history is repeating itself. You need to stop this war while you still can. Thexlar looked at the strategic map showing his crumbling empire. Part of him knew the archaeologist was right, but pride, stubbornness, and fear of showing weakness held him back. We will crush them, he said. Prepare for final assault on Earth, every ship, every soldier. We end this. Vallana left the meeting knowing that the Dominion was doomed. The humans had provoked exactly this response. They wanted the Dominion to commit everything to one final battle, and when that battle came, humanity would be ready. The Valkyrie Dominion assembled its largest fleet in history. 300 warships gathered at the staging point, representing nearly every combat vessel the Empire could spare. Thexlar stood on the bridge of his command dreadnought, the Eternal Dominance, and looked at the armada with grim satisfaction. This would be the final battle. One overwhelming assault that would break humanity forever. All ships report ready, Commander, Admiral Zexthar announced. Begin the jump to Earth. Show no mercy. Destroy their military completely. Reduce their cities to rubble if they resist. The galaxy must see what happens to those who defy us. The fleet entered faster than light travel. The journey would take 3 days. During that time, Thexlar reviewed intelligence reports about Earth's defenses. The humans had perhaps 100 ships, all smaller than his cruisers. They had orbital defense platforms, but nothing that could withstand the firepower he was bringing. The battle would be short and decisive. What Thexlar didn't know was that Earth had been preparing for exactly this moment. General Chen stood in her command center, watching long-range sensors track the Valkyrie fleet. 300 ships, just as predicted. They took the bait, she said. They're committing everything to one attack. We're outnumbered 3-1, her tactical officer pointed out. In ships, yes, but not in capability. Chen pulled up the tactical plan that had been years in the making. They're coming here thinking Earth is our only stronghold. They don't know about the colonies we've established, the shipyards we've built, the alliances we've made. Over the past 2 years, while the Dominion focused on fighting human raids, humanity had been building secret shipyards in remote asteroid fields, hidden colonies on uninhabited worlds, underground facilities that produced weapons around the clock. Earth appeared to be humanity's only base because that's what the humans wanted the Valkyrie to believe. The truth was far different. Humanity had spread across a dozen systems, building infrastructure the Dominion never detected. They had learned from being conquered. They would never put all their assets in one place again. When they arrive at Earth, they'll find a fight, Chen said, but not the fight they're expecting. Activate the full fleet, all hidden assets, every ship we've built. We end this today. The Valkyrie fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at Earth's orbit. Thexlar immediately saw that something was wrong. The orbital space was crowded with human ships. Not 100, not even 200. There were hundreds of vessels ranging from small attack craft to massive carriers that shouldn't exist. Where did they get the resources? He demanded. How did they build so many ships? Before anyone could answer, the human fleet opened fire. The battle began with a fury that shocked the Valkyrie. Human ships moved with coordinated precision, their AI systems sharing tactical data in real time. They attacked in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated to exploit weaknesses in Valkyrie formations. The humans had learned every lesson from 2 years of warfare. They knew how Valkyrie shields worked and where they were weakest. They knew optimal firing angles. They knew which systems to target first. And they fought with a desperation born of defending their homeworld. Thexlar watched as his carefully planned assault descended into chaos. 3 of his battlecruisers exploded in the first 10 minutes. Human attack craft swarmed his larger ships too fast to track effectively. Missiles came from unexpected angles, launched from hidden platforms in Earth's asteroid belt. The orbital defense platforms were far more powerful than intelligence had suggested. They hid their true strength, Admiral Zexthar said. Everything we thought we knew about their capabilities was wrong. All ships maintain formation. Focus fire on their carriers. Once their command ships fall, the rest will break. But the humans didn't break. When a carrier was destroyed, other ships immediately compensated. Their distributed command structure meant there was no single point of failure. The Dominion fleet, trained to follow rigid hierarchy, struggled to adapt when their formation was disrupted. Hours into the battle, Thexelar realized he was losing. His fleet had destroyed perhaps 80 human ships, but at the cost of over 100 Velkari vessels. The mathematics were brutal. Humanity was winning a war of attrition in their own solar system, where every destroyed human ship could be replaced while Velkari reinforcements were light years away. "Commander, we should withdraw," Zexthar urged. "Regroup and—" "No, we have them outnumbered." We pressed the attack, but the tide continued to turn against them. Human ships that had seemed damaged would suddenly accelerate into suicide runs, taking Velkari cruisers with them. Other human vessels would sacrifice themselves to protect their carriers, buying time for the larger ships to repair and return to battle. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose because, in a sense, they didn't. This was their home, their planet. They would die before they let it fall again. On Earth's surface, billions of people watched the battle through telescopes and video feeds. They saw their ships fighting against impossible odds. They saw pilots sacrifice themselves to take out enemy vessels. They saw humanity refusing to surrender, refusing to bow, refusing to accept defeat. And they saw the Velkari fleet beginning to break apart. Thexelar watched his tactical display with growing horror. Over half his fleet was gone. The survivors were damaged, low on ammunition, and demoralized. The humans were still fighting with undiminished fury. More human ships were arriving from other systems, reinforcements the Dominion hadn't known existed. "We've lost," Zexthar said quietly. "Commander, we must withdraw before we lose everything." Thexelar wanted to refuse, wanted to fight to the last ship, but military reality couldn't be denied. He was watching his empire's military power die in the cold space around a primitive world. If he lost the entire fleet here, the Dominion would be defenseless against rebellions elsewhere. "Signal retreat," he said, the words bitter as poison. But the humans weren't done. As the Velkari fleet tried to disengage, human ships pursued. They had learned brutal lessons from their own occupation. They had learned not to let enemies retreat and regroup. They chased the fleeing Velkari ships, destroying vessel after vessel. Thexelar's flagship was one of the last to escape. The Eternal Dominance jumped to faster-than-light travel with a dozen human ships on its tail, firing until the last possible moment. The flagship's shields failed during the jump, and the ship barely held together long enough to reach friendly space. When the battle was over, the Velkari had lost 200 ships. Humanity had lost 140. But the survivors on both sides knew the truth. The Dominion had gambled everything on one battle and lost. Their military was broken. Their economy was collapsing. Subject species across the Empire were rising in open rebellion, inspired by humanity's victory. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, the Velkari Dominion sued for peace. Thexelar was dead, killed by his own officers who blamed him for the disaster. The new government came to the negotiating table, ready to accept almost any terms to end the war. General Sarah Chen sat across from the Velkari delegation in a space station in neutral territory. She looked at these beings who had conquered her world, enslaved her people, and nearly destroyed her species. Part of her wanted revenge, wanted to grind them into dust the way they had tried to do to humanity. But she was a soldier, not a monster. And she knew that endless war helped no one. "Our terms are simple," she said. "Complete withdrawal from all human territories, reparations for the damage you caused, full technology exchange so we can rebuild what you destroyed, and a memorial on the predecessor world where you found those warnings. You're going to update those ancient files with what happened here, so the next empire that thinks about conquering humans will know exactly what they're facing." The Velkari agreed to everything. They had no choice. Their empire was crumbling around them, and they needed the war to end before they lost even more. 6 months later, Chen stood on the dead predecessor world where this had all begun. Archaeologist Velana stood beside her, activating the ancient data vault. New crystal storage modules sat alongside the million-year-old originals. "The predecessors tried to warn us," Velana said. "We didn't listen. Now maybe others will." Chen recorded her message for the data vault. She explained what had happened when the Velkari ignored the warnings. She detailed every battle, every tactic, every lesson learned, and she ended with words she hoped would save future civilizations from the same mistake. "We are humans. We are adaptable beyond measure, We endure beyond reason. We forgive much, but we forget nothing. We did not want this war. We gave the Velkhari chances to stop, to withdraw, to make peace. They refused, and they paid the price. Remember this when you look at our small blue planet and think we would be easy to conquer. Remember this when you think your technology or your numbers make you superior. Remember this when you're tempted to test us. We are patient. We are forgiving. We can be your greatest allies. But if you come as conquerors, you will learn what the Velkhari learned. You will learn what the predecessors learned millions of years ago. You will learn that some species should never be provoked. And by then it will be too late.